I say to you, the people of Lebanon, free your country from Hezbollah so that this war can end. Free your country from Hezbollah so that your country could prosper again, so that future generations of Lebanese and Israeli children will know neither war nor bloodshed, but will finally live together. Today, Hezbollah is weaker than it's been for many, many years. You have an opportunity to save Lebanon before it falls into the abyss of a long war that will lead to destruction and suffering like we see in Gaza.
What right does Benjamin Netanyahu have to tell the Lebanese people which side they should be on, or to give them any sort of directive in the first place?
He has absolutely no right. Absolutely no right. But you see, this is a game, and the man has become a master of spin. He, if you study his history, and there's a new documentary called The Bibi Files, which I recommend people watch. If you study his history, he is obsessed with power, and it's all about Netanyahu. And he's never forgotten the death of his brother, who was in an air raid, went into a rescue operation in Uganda to save Israeli hostages, and he was killed. He was a commander. This turned Netanyahu into a psychopath. Honestly, I can't describe him any other way. But he has absolutely no right to tell the Lebanese who we choose and what we do with our government, with our country. The point, though, that what he's trying to do is pull on the fears of the Lebanese. He's trying to divide the people because, yes, within Lebanon, and I've talked about this, it's a divided country on whether we should support Hezbollah or we should not support Hezbollah, whether we should have come down on Hezbollah for attacking Israel on October 8. And you've had this division for a long time. And I had many interviews, including with the former general in the Lebanese army and other people about this topic a couple of months ago. And I said, is this the time to be arguing about whether we should crush Hezbollah within, or should we be focusing on the bigger threat of Israel? And the general said, right now, without question, we need to unite and defend the country. Hezbollah is an internal issue that must be dealt with. Hezbollah should be carrying arms, and there should be the only institution that should be defending Lebanon is the Lebanese army. But we have this anomaly, and we should have dealt with it 18 years ago, but we haven't. But the reality is that people in Lebanon need to understand that everything Netanyahu said in that speech, in that delivery, which came across quite empathetic, was exactly the same words he said to the Gazans before he, invaded Gaza and launched his, annihilation campaign, the erasure of Gaza. So Netanyahu is playing a game so he can say to the rest of the world, well, I warned them, well, I told them, and they didn't listen. I gave them pre-warning that they should be getting rid of Hezbollah. They didn't get rid of Hezbollah, so we're coming in to do it, and we'll do it our way, which is exactly the same argument he is still using in Gaza, and it's all about eliminating Hamas, and they will never eliminate Hamas because, Hamas is a guerrilla force. It's going to come up and down, up and down, up and down, and he's just, created thousands of more Hamas devotees after, murdering so many children, women and men, innocent people in Gaza. And he's playing out the same game in Lebanon. We know this, and politicians, analysts all over the world are very aware of this. The problem is nobody is taking the only action that they can take, that they should take, to stop and rein in Israel. And that is by stopping the weapons and imposing sanctions. Not even Arab countries, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, all of these countries are continuing to do trade, have conversations, when it should have been nipped in the bud, as we say in Australia, 10 months ago, when they knew his ultimate plan. And his ultimate plan right now for Lebanon is to continue what he did in Gaza in Lebanon.
Here's the thing. I'm glad you mentioned the Arab countries. So let's segue into that before we talk about the other so many layers to this issue. Is one of the things that many, including yourself, have said is that, look, Israel is not about saving Lebanon from Hezbollah. In fact, what Israel is looking to do is to extend its landmass. Even more so
100%.
is that Israel needs water. Even in Nigeria, in the north of Nigeria, water is the biggest cause of a lot of the terrorism we have. So Israel, what the accusation is, the Litani River and all of that, Israel wants that river. That's why Israel keeps pushing further and further inland. Now, listeners, you need to understand this. Southern Lebanon, it meets with northern Israel. Get that? So it's southern Lebanon and northern Israel, not south to south. That's where the water is. Is that true? Because you also said that on your on one of your
Definitely.
reels. Is that true? And why does Israel want that water?
Okay, so this was studies done decades ago, and it's a debate, an issue that has actually been, it only comes up every now and then, but rarely by academics and experts in the region. But you talk to a really sharp analyst, and you read books from a few decades ago, and they said that the Third World War will be about water, not just in the Middle East, but as you said, in other countries around the world, because it's becoming, fresh water is becoming scarce. There are countries like Dubai that have desalination plants, but that's not, it's not enough. They still have to buy bottled water. They still have water that they have to bring in from outside to be able to drink. It's not enough to have a desalination plant. Israel, from when I was doing my studies and working as a Middle East expert and continuing to this day, Israel's plan and in its policies and in conversations offline more than online have been trying to work out how to deal with their water shortage problem. If you go to Israel, you will see what I mean, because I traveled it and I couldn't believe it, how barren the land is. Even when you look at videos from the West Bank, it's not like Lebanon. Lebanon is green. It's so rich and fertile. The Bekaa Plains, historically, they fed the entire Roman Empire, the Bekaa Plains. So and we have the mountains. The mountains every year, and the amount of snow and amount of rivers and amount of waterfalls that we have because of our unique geography creates wells, and we have wells under our country. And so you have these beautiful rivers which flow very strongly after those winter months. And the Litani River has historically been a very, important river for Lebanon, but also streaming down south. Now, when Israel occupied Lebanon from 1982 to 2000, it took much more area beyond the Litani River, and it controlled all of that territory, and it used that water supply, and they realized how important it was. But by 2000, international pressure on Israel to withdraw was so overwhelming that they had their own proxy army set up. They were, I know people who said, the Israelis were here and, we could go into Israel, and they would tell me stories. And I was like, oh, my God, are you crazy? But that is a major factor that has to be considered when considering why Israel is wanting to encroach into Lebanon. And what you mentioned earlier, the whole vision is the creation of the greater Israel boundaries, that take up all of Lebanon, all of Syria, all of Iraq, and into Saudi Arabia.
Which makes you wonder what's going on with the Saudi Arabians, but that's a whole different conversation. Now, one of the other things that since October 7th, after October 7th, so October 8th, Israel began its genocidal campaign on the Gazans, right? Israel also bombed Lebanon. Hezbollah responded. on October 8th, the very same day. Most people don't realize that there are hours difference. That, you know, Lebanon was attacked first, and then Hezbollah responded later. And one of the things that Hezbollah has always said is, if you get out of Lebanon and out of Gaza, we'll leave you alone. If you get out of Gaza, we have no issues with you. We'll go back to the resolution. There won't be any fights. What is the relationship between Gazans and, you know, Palestinians and Lebanon?
So, you know, the compassion that Lebanese feel for the Palestinians, it's a long and not a very pretty history that Lebanon and the Palestinians have shared, because the Palestinian PLO came into Lebanon in the 1970s and were instrumental in creating the civil war, or participating in creating the civil war. Lebanese Christian phalangists have a significant amount of responsibility for that as well. But there is a, you know, camaraderie. And 1948, when the Palestinians, the first Nakba started in Palestine, when they were being massacred by the new immigrants, Jewish immigrants, they came to Lebanon. It was close. They went to Lebanon and to Jordan. And so to this day, it's, you know, officially it's 500,000 Palestinian refugees. Unofficially, it's probably a much larger number than that. But we gave safe haven to those Palestinian refugees. And then in the 1967 war, also Arab-Israeli war, more Palestinian refugees came through. And 1973, there was another war, the third Arab-Israeli war. So there's been this, understanding. And many people say that that if the Lebanese government was doing the right thing, it would have granted those Palestinians the right to stay, the right to live, a passport, made them residents of Lebanon. But the Palestinians didn't want that. The Palestinians wanted the right of return. And they fought for that in the United Nations, and have fought for that since 1948, because if they take up, and some people obviously have, and around the world Palestinian refugees have settled in other countries, but their dream is to return to their homes. They've still got the keys of their fathers or grandparents' home, and they want to go home. It's no different to anyone else who wants to go home. That's their home. That's where their history is. That's where their ancestors are. That's where their stories live. Their identity is attached to this land and this home, and they won't give up on it.